Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is a special impromptu video that I may do more of, I may not do more of, because today we're not reviewing a book. I still intend to do my book review this week, but today we're actually reviewing a movie. A fairly popular movie at the moment, Cocaine Bear. And I was looking forward to seeing this. I actually don't go see many movies, as I get most of my entertainment from books and video games. But this caught my eye as I thought it might be a return to the early 2000s with the simply ridiculous stuff that we used to get back then. But before I give away my thoughts too much on it, let's do a bit of a recap. And I'm not going to cover everything that happened in the movie, partially not to spoil it, partially for copyright reasons. If you don't want to have the movie spoiled for you in any way, I'll leave a timestamp at the bottom so that you can skip past it. So the story takes place in 1985 when notorious drug smuggler Andrew C. Thornton makes a big screw up while throwing cocaine out of his aircraft. Basically, he bangs his head, knocking himself unconscious, and proceeds to fall to his death, landing in some poor person's driveway. Well, this alerts the authorities to the fact that not only was he carrying coke, but there's probably a great deal of cocaine sprinkled throughout the Chattahoochee National Forest just outside of where he landed. This leads us to what I'm going to affectionately refer to as our first victims. We find two foreign hikers, foreign being the best descriptor for, I guess, what they were trying to do. Basically planning their wedding and having a good old time and doing everything except the obvious of screaming, kill me, I'm the perfect victim out here. Well, when they finally climb the mountain they're trying to climb, using their camera, they spot a bear. And the bear is just doing bear things, kind of rubbing its face against a tree. But as the man starts to zoom in on it, he notices the bear doing odd things, like banging its head against the tree rather violently, persistently, and repetitively. And he comments to his fiancée, maybe we should leave the bear alone and just go somewhere else. The woman, not believing him for whatever reason and thinking the bear is not a danger, takes the camera from him to focus on the bear once again. And she sees it nuzzling a tree and then kind of looking their direction. The man takes the camera back and the bear is gone. Except it's not. It's just a lot closer now and coming straight for them. After discussing whether to fight or play dead, the man tells the woman the worst thing that she could do was run. And she proceeds to run. And the bear proceeds to tackle her to the ground and maul her extremely violently, right there in sight of the man. The man who basically runs away. Cut to a different area, and we are introduced to Deirdre, who is playing hooky with her friend Henry, both of which are about 13 years old, and they are playing hooky because Deirdre wants to paint the secret waterfall in the Chattahoochee National Forest. And the reason she's playing hooky to do it is because her mom decided she wanted to take them off with her new pediatrician boyfriend to Nashville instead of going to paint the waterfall that weekend, because Deirdre is not possessed of patience. While walking through the forest, they stumble upon one of the bags of cocaine and another bag that's ripped open. After some playing around with it and attempting to eat it and spitting it out, the cocaine bear arrives and scares the living crap out of both of them. This lasts just long enough for us to cut to another scene of notorious drug lord Sid White talking to his fixer, David. Sid wants David to go to the Chattahoochee National Forest and recover the cocaine because his smuggler was an idiot and died. They need to get this cocaine so that the Colombians don't come and kill them all. I think a fantastic motivation, if there ever was one. Sid also tells him to go pick up Sid's worthless son, who has been doing nothing but sulking ever since his wife died. Darn those pesky emotions, doesn't this boy know we got cocaine to run? It's the 80s. It's only going to be popular for another 6 years. Cut back to Deirdre's mom. Deirdre's mom gets a call from the school to find out that she cut school. After doing a quick search, she finds the boy Henry's backpack, which has the secret falls circled on a map in it. Very, very convenient and very, very poor way to play hooky. She immediately goes to the park ranger, who is attempting to woo the wildlife inspector, I believe his job was. and says, "My child has run away into the woods. Please come help me find them." After a little bit of back and forth, they finally agree to walk to the secret falls in order to find the missing girl. Upon reaching the spot where Deirdre and her friend were last seen, we find Henry up in a tree, hiding from the cocaine bear. Nobody listening to him when he tells them it's not a normal bear, it's big and violent, and the wildlife inspector telling him, "No, bears aren't violent, blah blah blah," typical hippie stuff. Cocaine Bear shows up and decides to prove them all wrong by violently attacking the park ranger. The wildlife inspector basically craps his pants, crawls through the bush and through a pile of cocaine and up a nearby tree and hopes to escape the bear. The bear then runs away from the park ranger because she starts shooting at it, which is a very suitable response for being shot at. The park ranger escapes, claiming she's going to go get help and bring it back, running away with her mauled butt cheeks hanging out of her pants. The mother hides behind a tree, and they're all looking for where the bear went. The bear appears and starts trying to climb the tree after Henry. The wildlife inspector and Deirdre's mom are encouraging Henry to keep climbing to stay away from the bear. None of them seem to realize there's really not many places for the bear to go, but about halfway up the tree, the bear smells something. The cocaine on the inspector's shirt. After locking eyes with the inspector, the bear immediately jumps from the tree, runs to the tree the inspector has climbed, climbs it, and begins to maul him in a particularly, let's just say, off-putting way. Deirdre's mom has Henry jump down to her, and the two proceed to escape from the cocaine bear. Cut back to the ranger station, and David and Eddie, Sid's son, have arrived at the park in order to locate the cocaine. David goes to wash up in the bathroom before they head into the forest proper, where he is immediately ambushed by 3 local teenagers, who he proceeds to beat the ever-loving crap out of. At the end of the fight, however, he notices a strange pain, and it turns out he's been stabbed in the back of his shoulder. In a room full of unconscious teenagers with a knife in your back. Not a really good way to spend a weekend, I do assume. After Eddie comes into the bathroom, seeing David cleaning his knife wound and complaining about his torn jersey, he sees the unconscious teenagers on the ground and says, "Hey, are they dead?" To which David says, "Well, maybe one of them is." And they find cocaine in one of the teenagers' bags, so they take the one that looks like he might not be dead and wake him up with a bucket of bathroom water to the face. Delightful. The teenager is then threatened into showing them where they hid the cocaine, which he says it's in the gazebo. And for those of you who are not from this area of Appalachia, a gazebo is a pavilion, which the teenager has to explain. David threatens the teenager into showing them where it is, telling Eddie to go get his gun so he can shoot the teenager if he doesn't show them. The teenager, under threat of violence, promptly agrees to show the gentleman to exactly where he has hidden their cocaine. And I'm going to leave off the recap there, mainly to avoid spoilers, but it's a movie called Cocaine Bear. You can imagine what's going to happen. So let's talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and my thoughts. So first of all, I liked this concept. I liked the idea of silly movies about weird situations dealing with animals. It was a genre I was kind of fond of back in the early 2000s, the 2010s. There was a lot of silly stuff made. The premise kind of reminded me of scary movie series, the disaster movie, stuff like that. They were corny, they were awful, but after some of the movies we've had in the past decade, kind of welcome. And I have to admit, the bear itself is pretty scary. They did a really good job of portraying the terror of facing a bear in the wild, and one on coke, well, made it even worse. And for the most part, the plot makes sense. At least most of the plot makes sense. It's a bear who ate some cocaine that fell from the sky. It's looking for more coke, and it kills anyone who gets in the way and plows over anything that it sees as an obstacle. The drug dealers are obviously looking for the coke to recover it, and there are cops looking for the drug dealers. I also really like the character of Sid White. He's honestly the only character that feels like he really belongs there. When I look at him, it's like, this guy looks like people I remember from the 80s and 90s. Just perfectly got him. The mother kind of feels a little bit like this too, but Sid White as the character just takes the cake, and he feels a lot like a drug dealer, at least at the beginning of the story. He's ruthless. He doesn't care for excuses. He's just looking to get the job done, and I feel he was horribly underutilized. But unfortunately, this list of likes is going to be pretty short because the list of dislikes is pretty long. First of all, on the dislikes, the horror versus comedy does not work here. They both seem to be working against each other. The gory elements are just too gory to make the comedy work, and the comedy elements are just too campy to make the horror work. And also, it has to be mentioned, there's a lot of trauma in this. Just people witnessing people being mauled to death by bears, and we get to see what feels like realistic reactions. But this is supposed to be funny, and it's just not. For example, we meet the hiker from the beginning of the movie later, and he's just sitting there crying over his dead, I wanted to say wife, but pre-wife. He's crying because of his pre-wife and how she was mauled by the bear. And it's actually kind of sad, and if this had been meant to be a horror movie purely, it might have been a pretty powerful scene, but the campiness of other parts of the movie ruin it, really. Also, there's some problems with characters. In the story, there is a large black cop who is, and I say large, I mean fat. He's a big fat guy. But I like him as a character. He feels about like the second most fitting character for the movie. And he's been trying to expose Sid White's gang for a long time. And let me just stop and say Sid White is a fantastic name for a coke dealer. Anyway, the cop has tried to adopt a dog. He wanted a Labrador from an adoption service, and instead he gets one of those little teacup dogs with the really long hair that look like they have no legs. He's trying to find someone to take care of it and settles on his partner so he can follow up on a lead. And his partner she feels like the modern interpretation of what Hollywood thinks the female cop should be. She's half black, she's got what looks like a giant pile of moldy dreadlocks on her head, but she serves the purpose of watching the dog. Well, later on, the cop catches up to the drug dealers, and he's trying to make them surrender from the top of the gazebo. And the lady cop shows up, and he thinks backup has arrived, and then it turns out that the lady cop has betrayed him. And unfortunately, the large cop dies. Partially because of this betrayal, I don't think it's entirely tied to it. It was a big character development moment for Sid, but it's not really used again later. But there is a moment later with this lady cop who just seemed to show up for the betrayal, and she's following them through the woods to recover the cocaine, and she says, "I'm going home." To which Sid holds up his gun, points it at her face, and basically says, "The hell you are." And for some reason, his fixer, who, as far as we know, has no connection to this woman, steps between Sid and this woman to defend her. So she just gets to walk away from these known drug dealers, knowing everything she knows. This feels like plot armor, and I'm assuming that's because it's plot armor. And furthermore, this lady cop suffers no repercussions, 1 for betraying her partner, and 2 for being involved in a drug ring, which I'm assuming is the reason she showed up. I'm not assuming she just showed up, saw the situation, and decided to side with the drug dealers, and the drug dealers are like, "Hey, we're just going to let this go." Next, let's talk about the fixer David. I was a little bit iffy about him at first until we got to the fight in the bathroom, and it's like, okay, now he's starting to feel more like someone who's involved in the drug trade. He just beat the crap out of 3 people, despite the fact he's kind of portly. He doesn't look like he's in shape, but he's finally starting to feel like the character. But then when he's forcing the teenager through the woods, he's taking way too much lip from this kid he's supposed to have basically threatened to kill if he doesn't get to the cocaine. He feels far too soft to be a fixer for such a prominent drug dealer. So his character is just wildly inconsistent. He doesn't feel as violent as he needs to feel. And furthermore, again, with him stepping between his boss and the traitor cop to stop his boss from shooting the traitor cop does not feel earned. That's going to bring me to the biggest spoilers of all, because I'm going to talk about the thing that upsets me the most. And so you can probably end the video here if you don't want to hear it, because I'm about to talk about the ending. 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, spoilers ahead. Sid White is killed by Cocaine Bear and Cocaine Bear's cubs, because the moment you see the cubs, you know what's going to happen. But there's a part before Cocaine Bear shows up where the cubs are trying to basically climb up Sid in order to get to the bag of cocaine he's carrying. They're on the side of a cliff and he has a gun. And he's telling them to get the bears off of him rather than simply kicking the cubs off the side of the ledge. This might sound cruel, but Sid is a drug dealer. Earlier in the story, he killed somebody with his rifle from a distance before he ever spoke to them. He just shot them and then proceeded to advance. This man is supposed to be a ruthless killer. Furthermore, he is motivated by the fact that if he doesn't recover enough of this cocaine, the Colombians are going to come after him and his family, something his son, who is not but should be concerned about, doesn't seem to be concerned about. So instead of kicking these cubs off the curb, he tosses his guns to the woman who he was threatening 5 seconds before. Why? We have no idea. It's stupid. There's no reason for him to do this, even if he was panicking, which he shouldn't have been. They were bear cubs. They're the size of a large dog. They're awkward, and he's literally right next to a cliff. He could have simply kicked them over. They couldn't have weighed more than 30 pounds each, and they were right there at his feet. He doesn't seem to show the grit at this point that he should have. And everybody else jumps off the cliff into the waterfall and survives, while Sid stays up there trying to recover a bag of cocaine in front of a bear and obviously is killed by the bear. It's not a very good ending. And shortly after this, at the end, when the mother and her daughter and this boy are walking home, and I'm mentioning this because this is the most shoehorned in thing I have ever seen. The boy looks at this girl who we've known throughout most of the movie he has a crush on and tells her, "You're the strongest person I've ever known, but now I see where you got it from," talking about the kid's mom. This feels so forced. First of all, this kid has seen people mauled in the last few hours, several of which died, and he even comments that it's something that's probably going to stick with him for the rest of his life. They are literally walking by a destroyed ambulance, which the Cocaine Bear destroyed earlier, with dead people all around them, and he decides to comment on the strength of his crush's mom. It's just out of left field. It just feels contrived and forced. So let's get into my thoughts. So I don't want to say I'm mad, and I don't want to say this is bad, but I am going to say I was disappointed. There were parts in this movie that made me laugh, but they were very few and far between. There were also parts that felt genuinely horrifying. But since I was laughing 5 minutes earlier, and there were too many jokes, they just didn't land properly. I feel like there was a lot of potential in this movie, and they should have either focused on the horror side or the comedy side, preferably the comedy side. Let it have been an odd movie, just something a little bit funny. Either show less gore or make it over the top and bizarre, something that's just kind of joking. But they went for some fairly visceral gore. It just doesn't work for what they're trying to do. And with that being said, I will wish you all good luck. Thank you for listening to my review. If you have any books that you would like to hear my take on, please leave them in the description. I do tend to favor indie authors over conventionally published, but I will read whatever I find interesting or whatever captures my fancy. If you would like to read, review, or criticize my own works, I will include a link in the description. Also, please keep the comments civil in the comments section. Also, if you enjoy what I do, please consider giving this video a like, sharing my work, or subscribing to my channel. Thank you.